Today I'm going to show you how to take an image of a macro flower, and I'm going to show you the step-by-step process to editing this image. The first thing you want to do is you want to open up the raw file, which is the CR2 file. You're going to go to File, Open, and then you're going to go search out the image that you will be editing. So you come down and here are a bunch of macro flowers, and now what I need to do is find the image that I plan on editing. Which is, I believe it is 6551. Or is it 6552? I have to double check that, so I'm looking carefully at my image. Aha, it is 6559. All right, so I'm going to open up the CR2 file of 6559. Alrighty, so this was previously processed already, and we could see here that we have a temperature of 5450, a -2 tint. The exposure is on the lower side, so if we look at this histogram, we can see here that the exposure is more to the left, because for these particular images we want them to be a little darker, and we also want the color to be a little more intense. And so if we look at the exposure, it's kind of in the middle here because there already was a very dark image to start with. So if you have an image that has a lot of light, you're actually going to want to move it down to the left. Okay. And we have contrast kind of in the middle, highlights and shadows and whites are in the middle here. We have a blacks, because again, we want the blacks to be a little more intense. That's a little more to the left. And then we have some clarity that was moved up, and then we look over here at vibrance and saturation, and it's much higher. It's because we want the colors to be more intense. So the goal is to have a darker flower with more intense colors, and how you adjust it on our raw processing will be, dependent upon the image and what the beginning exposures are, and then you will end up having. You want to end up having an image that's slightly darker with more intense colors. And then once you do that, you want to open your image. Okay. Now the next step is to duplicate this layer, and you're going to call it working image. Alrighty. So now this is where you're going to make all your changes. You're going to make all your changes to your working image layer, not your background layer. So the next step is to experiment with filters from our filter gallery. So you're going to come up here to filter. You are then going to go to filter gallery, and you want to look under either artistic. Okay, so you have the option of, and colored pencil is the one you would select from artistic, or brush strokes, and crosshatch is the one you would select from the brush strokes, or sketch, and charcoal is the one you would select. And then there's also poster edges, which I believe is under artistic. The one that I have found that has worked the best is colored pencil and charcoal. Those are the two that I've experimented with a number of different images, and I have found that colored pencil and charcoal tends to work the best. The goal of the filter gallery effect is to add an artist effect. Okay, so like color pencils or crosshatch or charcoal, they're all an artist effect. And so when you add this effect, you want to make sure that the image is not blurry, first of all. You want to see the details of the artist effect applied to the image, but you want to make sure that the image remains sharp, That is really important. And so I would like you to look at some of the different examples. There's crosshatch that is applied to a detail of an orchid, as well as color pencil. Poster edge is added to a calla lily, and then color pencil effect is also added to some lilies and some orchids. So please look at those examples and kind of get an idea of how these effects are going to look. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add a colored pencil effect to the orchid flower. Now, you will note that once you add that effect, that you need to either change the pencil width, the stroke pressure, or the paper brightness. Now, in doing so, the goal is to have defined lines. You want to have good details and value tones in the petals. You want to make sure there's no blur effects, and you also want to have nice color. Now, if you're using the charcoal effect, there won't be any color. It'll become a black and white image. So you can see examples of how the different effects have been added to the same image. So you can see a colored pencil or a charcoal effect or a crosshatch. The crosshatch works not very well, in my opinion, with this particular orchid flower. All right, so I set mine to 10, 11, and 41. So 10 for pencil width, 11 for stroke pressure, and paper brightness 41. All right, so you can see how it looks. It doesn't look very good right now, okay? And that's okay. We are going to continue to work on this image. Okay, so what we want to add is a layer mask to our working image, and we want to bring back some of the black background of our background. Okay, so you want to add a layer mask, and then we want to use a nice soft brush, probably about 500 or so, you know, somewhere in around 500. And then we want to make sure black is over white, and we're going to keep our opacity at 100% as we just go around these sides where we don't have any flowers. When we get closer to the flowers, we're going to reduce our brush size and get in more carefully around our flowers. Okay, so I've been doing this now for a little while, and I'm going to show you what it looks like as we get closer to being finished. All right, so you can see that I've gone in with a much smaller brush, and I've carefully gone in all around my flower with a much smaller brush, getting in very close to the edge of the flowers. And now I just have a little bit of the left side to finish it out. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in on the left side so that I'm completely done with bringing back the black background. All right, so the next step is to add in a hue saturation adjustment layer. So I'm going to come down over here. I'm going to click on my hue saturation adjustment layer. And what I want to do is I want to saturate the colors a little more. So I'm going to bring up my saturation. And then after that, my next step is to bring in a brightness and contrast layer. So I'm going to come down to my adjustment layers. I'm going to bring in a brightness and contrast layer. And my goal here is to add some contrast, which will help to sharpen the image a little bit. And I might go back on my saturation layer and just bring that down just a little bit. Okay, and then come back to my brightness and contrast layer. Okay, that looks good for contrast. It did help to sharpen the image a little bit. All right, so the final step is to go back in on our working image layer mask. So click on the layer mask. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove some of the filter gallery effect so that we can bring back some of the color that originates on our background layer. Okay, so we're going to bring back some of that color. So I'm going to click on my working image layer mask. I'm going to make sure my black is over white. I'm going to select my brush tool, set it to about 500, and I'm going to put my opacity down to about 30%. And then I'm going to just go in where there is color and just click lightly. And what's happening is some of my color is coming through a little bit, but I'm also still maintaining the texture effect that I added with the filter gallery. So then what will happen is your layer mask will have a couple of light gray rounded shapes in your layer mask. And you can see that on the example. All right, this is our final step, and once you've done this, you are done and ready to turn it in. Before we end this tutorial though, I wanted to show you a couple more sample images that I worked on. Here is one that has a yellow calla lily and some pink orchids, and you can see here that I've added a color pencil effect. And if you look at the layer masks, they are different because the images are different. Sample number 4 is a white calla lily, and a poster effect was added to this image. And sample number 6 is a detail of an orchid, and a color pencil effect was added to this image. So, and also finally a color fill was also added to give it a little bit of a darker edge at the top. So you have some options to add in a vignette if you want, but it may not be needed because, like we look at this example here, a vignette is definitely not needed because it's black all along the edges.